Hi, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, and I'm here with my weekly series talking to fathers about modern fatherhood. And I've got a guest today that I'm very interested in talking to personally because some of the struggles that I'm going through and our family's going through. But I've got Evan Sanchez with us today, and he's a coach, but he specializes in helping kids get off the ground and get to that next stage after they graduate from college. And if your kids are not at that stage yet, they will at some point be in that launch mode. And I think Evan's going to have some real good things for us to think about because I just know how difficult this is. So welcome, Evan.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
So your
Glad to be
kids are
here.
not yet in this mode, but you've had a lot of experience with other kids who are more in the 21, 22-year-old range. What got you interested in this in the first place? Since sometimes, quite often, it's the need that drives the, the specialization or the study.
It's really interesting because what I thought about is like, how did I feel in my 20s? How were my parents showing up for me in my 20s? And obviously, it was a very different time.
Yeah.
I'm Gen X. It was a very different time. And so what I felt like that my parents weren't showing up in the way that I would have liked. And that would have been really empowering to me. And that
Hmm.
really would have helped me.
Hmm.
And so when I thought about this, I was like, I know there's a whole bunch of kids out there who are struggling to find their purpose, to find their dream careers, to find what really motivates them and fits them, especially in this crazy job market with AI coming in, all of those sort of things. It's drastically different from what I grew up with because I grew up with no technology.
Right. Right.
But the point is like if you know how to talk to your kids, talk to your young adults in a certain way, it will empower them and it will give them the ideas to help them launch.
Yeah. So when you say your parents weren't like uh, ready or didn't speak to you in the appropriate way, what does that mean? You can give examples of how they were out of touch with you, or there was that disconnect that you didn't feel like they were supporting you in the right way?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. My parents were in academia.
Okay.
Mm. They're college professors. They're
Right.
very knowledgeable, all PhDs, all very successful in their own right. But I did not want to go into that.
Right.
At
Yeah.
the time, I wanted to go into the music industry. That was what was appealing to me in the late 80s, early 90s. And the way and I went ahead and did it regardless.
Hmm.
And I'm happy that I did because I followed my instincts and I followed my intuition of what I wanted to do. It was just seen as frivolous, as not important. I wasn't taken
Mm.
seriously.
No, so worse than not fully understanding where you're coming from was his dismissal of who you were and what you wanted.
Yes.
And that's probably a
Yes.
first good, indicator that you're probably doing it wrong if you're telling your kid, don't go into X, 'cause that would be bad or wrong
Right.
or
Right. And that's what I think a lot of parents do. And they mean it from a well-intentioned place.
yeah.
When you give advice, you're saying, this is what it was like for me. This is the struggle I had, and I don't want you to repeat that.
Right.
I don't want you to
Yeah.
make the same mistake. So here's my advice to you. The challenge with that, with the challenge with giving advice, and even, my kids are still in college and I still have this challenge because when they become adults, they stop taking your advice.
Yeah.
And even as teenagers, they stop taking your advice. Mom and dad are not smart anymore. They're not guiding you right. So you
Or
give
they're
them,
not, or as we said, we were talking about just before we started, is that it may not be that we're not smart, but we are out of touch. We're completely out of touch with the current
exactly,
world, where our advice is tailored to 40 years ago and therefore has no value.
exactly. We don't know the Gen Z slang.
Yeah.
We're lucky that we know Taylor Swift at all.
Right.
So, so those sorts of things. So the challenge with giving advice is that when you give advice, what happens is, and this happens for not only just for for kids, for children, but for anyone. When you give advice, it comes across as judgment.
Yeah.
It comes across as it it challenges your brain. It challenges the amygdala, if I can say that word right, amygdala, and the amygdala is there to keep us safe.
Right.
That's part of the dream is to keep us safe. So it's always looking for anything that could be a danger. And so what your kid is thinking is this potential shame? Is this judgment? Is
Yeah.
this criticism?
Hmm.
And that's the way it comes across.
Yeah.
But that's not the way you intention.
Right.
That's not what your intention was. Your intention was to keep them off the third rail
Right.
and to keep them down a path that makes sense and for them to consider other options or consider all of this. But the challenge is that when we give advice to even to grown people, they're less likely to take it because it activates that part of their brain.
Right. And we do that as parents unintentionally from I don't know when that starts. There's some point in there where they're no longer our little people under our control. You will take piano lessons or you
Right,
will
right.
try soccer or whatever. But now it becomes more like if you don't try soccer, you're that's kind of disappointing. Or if you don't apply to Harvard, well, you're not the child that I really wanted to have. And these are the worst types of messages. And I don't know why we're so tempted. I mean, I'm a professional coach. I know how to have conversations with clients, but I fall into these same traps with my kids. And I'm always like struggling, reminding myself, don't do that. Ask the questions. Don't give the advice. But do you think it's something about parenting that makes it extra hard for us, even when we know not to do it, to keep on falling into that trap? Maybe it's a safety issue.
Absolutely. 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 I mean, when the kids are young, you're telling them not to touch the stove.
Yeah.
That's solid advice.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
touch the hot stove.
Right.
And they rely on that guidance for a certain period of time. But then it starts to get, it's then they start to come up with their own ideas and their own thoughts and their own values and their own beliefs and their own perceptions of life and their own interpretations. And that's when it becomes fuzzy in
Hmm.
the teens, and that's why they're not taking the advice. And as they get older and older and older, they're probably less inclined to take that advice. So I think you're absolutely right. It's because not only are we their parent and we want the best for them,
Yeah.
but it's because we've been trained to keep them safe.
Sure.
We want
Yeah.
to keep them safe. I just ran into a friend around the block and he has a 1 year old, and I'm like, congratulations on keeping them alive for a year.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
So that's where that comes from. I think you're absolutely right on with that.
So how do you feel about, I mean, it's one thing to say, plastics, or now the variation on that would be artificial intelligence. That's where the future is. What are there pieces of advice like that are uh, appropriate? Like one thing that I've been telling my son recently, because he's thinking he graduated in next spring and he's thinking of taking a gap year or doing something
Mhm.
else. And I've been giving him this big piece of life advice, which is this is a special time in your life. You have a flexibility to do things, yeah, and your choices are lie around on the couch for a year or do something out in the world. And I said, life goes by really fast. Whatever you do, I have no, I don't want to put any valid judgment on it. You do what's right for you, but be a flight attendant, go work on a ski resort, go to chef training, do something big and exploratory, even if it's not related to what you want to do next. Is that too much advice, or would you say that's appropriate type of framing?
I would frame that as slightly different. I would
Yeah,
phrase
okay.
that as not advice,
Right.
but encouraging what I call messy action.
Uh-huh.
Messy action is when you don't know what you like, when you don't know what's going to work, when you don't know what the result is going to be, but you do it anyway.
Right.
So if your kids are like my kids, they went through several sports
Right.
before they found what they wanted.
Hmm.
They went through several friends before they found what they resonated with. Girlfriends, boyfriends, all of that sort of stuff.
Right.
They have to take messy action, and we have to, as parents, we have to encourage that. And I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right. I would phrase that again. I would phrase that as not giving advice, but encouragement.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
encouraging. It's encouraging them to make a mistake, to not be perfect,
Hmm.
to
Well,
not.
it's interesting distinction because I think it's easy to turn that encouragement like I encourage you to look at a job in, X. What is the
Right.
difference? How do you differentiate between what that encouragement is? Like the one thing that I'm struggling with also is the idea of networking and how important that is
Hmm.
when you're looking for a job and when you're talking to your child and you're saying, well, I mean, basically, you should go out there and network and you should talk to our friends and this person really would like to help you if you bother to to pick up the phone and call them and whatever. But that in itself is kind of like, and if you don't do it, there's a somewhat of a value judgment, or are you lazy because you didn't call the person I told you to call, or all
Hmm.
those kind of things, I think are what parents worry about. And then we verge into that thing that goes from encouragement then to it's not the word advice probably, but it's more, nagging and pushing and reminding and all that stuff that always feels really uncomfortable.
Yes, yes. And the best way kind of around that whole situation is to just ask them open-ended questions.
Sure.
What does a good next step look like for you?
Uh-huh.
What does success look like for you? One of my favorite questions to ask is what would your future self be proud of
Yeah.
in 5 years?
Right. Right.
And so you're not telling them to go network necessarily
Right.
because they have to come up with the idea. Again, if they come up with the idea, they're going to be more likely to do it
Yeah.
because
Solid tenant coaching.
well, exactly. It's the tenet of coaching is like if you come up with the idea, if I ask you empowering questions, usually starting with what or how, and you do it in a safe way, not in a judgy, critical tone,
Yeah.
obviously. But if you say like, what would, what kind of job would you like to get? Or what's interesting to you right now? Or what's exciting to you right now? Or how would you go about that? What would that look like?
Hmm.
Things like that. So I would say what you're doing is you're encouraging them to think for themselves, and when they come up with the idea, then they're more likely to do it.
Hmm.
So when that happens, then you're not telling them to network,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of the again not giving advice, but when they do take action, the important thing is that when they do actually network or if they do something, anything in any direction that you feel is a step forward, you have to have a celebration of some sort. It can be a high five, it can be a great job on that, it could be a fist bump, it could be anything, because if you just say, hey, great job on that, they take that to heart. They love that. Everybody loves to be told that
Yeah.
that they did a great job.
Right.
But the more you encourage that messy action, the more likely they are to take more messy action,
Yeah. That's really good.
even if it didn't work out, even if it was a totally, dead end, wrong direction. You're like, at least you learned something. Great job. And
So
that's
you talked about that kind of classic interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? How about the idea of saying, what, you're old enough now to have seen the world a little bit and get an idea of what's out there. What kind of things do you want to have accomplished in 40 years? Like like if you,
Exactly.
it's the old thing is like, if you write down at age 20, the 10, 20, 30, 50 things you want to accomplish in your life, you have a far, far better chance of actually doing those things than if you just say, well, let's see see what the world brings me during the next, 50 years. Is that in
Exactly.
itself a bad exercise? I guess it's
I
probably not
think
as
it's
bad
a
an
I think it's a
exercise if you
phenomenal
don't force
exercise.
a few items on
I
there that
think it's a
are wrong.
fine, phenomenal exercise. But again, I usually frame it as what would your 80 self-year-old be proud of, or your 50-year-old self be proud of?
Yeah,
And if they can come up with that list, then then those are their goals.
right.
And so you're just approaching it a different way, but I think it's exactly spot on in
Yeah,
terms of what would you like, you only have, one time on this earth.
yeah,
What do
which
you
they don't
want to have
understand at all.
happen?
That's too, that's
What's that?
too
That's too existential.
for them. Yeah, they don't get that, I
That's
don't
too
think.
much for them. Their 20s are they're immortal. I get it. I was there too. So, but yeah, it's really about like what do they want their life to look like? If they have, just like, blue sky it.
Yeah.
And the hard part is that when they're not when they're sitting on the couch
Hmm.
and just getting depressed and they're in that depressive state, they're not going to be making good decisions.
Yeah.
They have to figure out how to get themselves at a higher energy level, just like go for a walk. Everybody feels better after a walk.
Yeah.
You don't usually feel depressed after a walk.
I wonder about them also at this age, in their 20s. Maybe they don't realize how short even 80 years is, but they
It
also don't
is.
realize how short their 20s are. That amount of freedom, untethered to a mortgage and relationships and eventually children and all the rest of the things that kind of really narrow your world down in many times in a great way. I don't want to take anything
Yes.
away from that because I have a website called GreatDad.com. But the 20s are so special in that way, and I you somehow you want to convince them of the immediacy or the urgency of action. Do you see that frustration among a lot of parents you talk to? Like
Yeah,
their kids don't get the fact that that it goes by in a blink of an eye. It might not seem like that to at their age, but it does.
yeah. There's they haven't made any progress from one year to the next year, or they've
Yeah.
been sitting on the sofa for 3 years, or they've been sitting in
So
a dead end job for three
you
years.
talk to kids and parents where the kids have been listless
Yes.
for 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, just like not moving at all, or if they are moving, they're moving in directions that are not healthy,
Yeah.
or still hanging around.
Unhealthy people.
I had one mom who said, even though she graduated from college, she's still hanging around drug addicts, like dangerous people.
Yeah.
And and the daughter was working in special ed and she loves it, but she's also like hanging around the wrong
Yeah.
environment.
Right.
So it's very tough to have that conversation of like you have a low risk profile right now. Like you stated, you have a low risk profile. You don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, you don't have a
Yeah.
spouse. You're good.
Yeah.
You
You
can
can
you
eat
can
pizza
travel, you
five,
can
6 days a
travel the
week.
world, right?
Yeah.
And for them not to realize the opportunity that they have
Mm.
is very, very challenging. And I run into a lot of parents who try to express that to their kids, but the kids just don't get it.
Yeah.
And
Do you think this generation is more risk averse because of potentially based on our parenting, but also because the world is so tenuous? I mean, I think they look outside and a lot of them are really just traumatized about climate change. It's a story that we don't talk about very much, but they have this existential dread about it that we did not have. I mean, maybe nuclear war was a thing back,
right.
40, 50 years ago, but it didn't, that was seen, it seemed to be such a hypothetical, whereas the
Hmm.
climate change is getting worse. So it's obvious. And then they see the political situation, all the rest, and I just wonder if they are just like oh boy, if I got a boyfriend or a girlfriend and I got a job at the convenience store and yeah, is at least I've got some peace in my life and maybe that's enough.
Right. It's hard because it varies per kid. It varies per situation. But I think a lot of people are because when we grew up, we were just taught, go to school, go to college, you'll have a job, you'll be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
It was very simple. It was very
yeah,
cut and dry.
yeah,
There wasn't AI, there wasn't technology,
right,
there wasn't climate change, there wasn't all these existential threats to um, their survival in
right.
general. So I think that, yes, I think that a lot of kids, a lot of young adults have that problem of like, I went through COVID. That was terrible.
Yeah.
And and now you're telling me that if I go to college, I may not get a job. And now you're telling me that even if I go to college and get a job, then AI may take my job. So
Right.
I think that they do have a lot of I think it's rightfully so. I don't think it's a challenge because some people say, well, Gen Z is just lazy. And I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I don't believe that they're lazy. I believe that they want meaningful dialogue. They want to be treated as a whole human being,
Yeah.
not
That is
just
true.
as a worker,
Right.
not just they want, if you have a job, they want the company to value their mental health,
Right.
to value them as a person and not to try to exploit them. And
Right.
that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So I think that there's that energy going on with them is that they realize how important mental health is where we didn't realize it at all 40, 50 years ago, right?
Right. Yeah.
And now they're realizing that it's not just having the job, it's having you know the mental health as well. And I think that's what they're really considering at this point. They're not just considering like I'll just get a job and I'll grind, but they know if they grind that'll affect their mental health. So
Yeah.
I think they're taking a lot of things into account, and it's challenging.
Yeah. Do you have any advice also for this is an age, this is a thing that goes on for, last second 10 years of their life through the 10 through 20 is
Right.
how you distinguish between their friends who may have gotten jobs right out of school, either by luck or connections or smarts or whatever it was, and this tendency to compare and say, yeah, I know it's hard out there, but you know, Johnny's son got a job, without any trouble, and he was a philosophy major, or one of those things where
Right, right,
where
right.
it's like if they can do it, why can't you? And obviously that's not a great way to phrase that, but we unintentionally as parents do that all the time. Like during when it's college season, everybody's talking about who got into Harvard and Yale. They never talk about the kid who's following his dream and going to another school that's perfect for his major or whatever. It's always only the greatest achievers. No mention of their happiness, but always that
Right,
they
right,
run they
right.
ran they won the award. But how do we? I guess how do we square that in our own minds that some kids are going to get jobs right away and defy the odds that seem to be stacked against them right now, versus our kid who's, for all intents and purposes, as great at grades
Mhm.
and all as dynamic and everything, but has been struggling for a year.
Yeah, I think comparison is really hard.
Yeah.
I think we deal with it as adults too, because we're always looking at our neighbors and like what kind of car do they have, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think comparing your kid to another kid is we all believe that our kids are the greatest and best and smartest, and they're unique in their own ways, and we as parents appreciate that. But it is a very easy trap to fall into to do the comparison game of like so and so, you know, got a six-figure job just, within 3 years, and here you are working, at Target.
You're right.
So I think that it's really important for us to try not to compare our kids' journey because whatever journey they're on is right for them. We have
Is
to,
that true? Is that true though? I mean, is it
yes.
sometimes, but sometimes the journey that isn't right for the, like they didn't pick the journey and they're just on a different journey and they're I mean, we as parents maybe have to make peace with that's not our journey, but it's not
Right,
always right for them. I mean,
right.
right? I mean,
It's not always, I mean, if it's their journey to get involved with drug addicts, then
yeah, that's not a good journey.
that's probably not a good journey to be on. But we do have to recognize that they're on their own path,
Yeah,
that they're going to
right.
do things in their way. And we have to, it's again, just really easy to do comparison. And that's, and what do they say about comparison? Comparison is the theft of joy.
Mm, yeah,
And I think
that's
that
good.
that's an important thing to realize, both as, both as talking to our children and, when we're talking about ourselves. I actually came up with a bumper sticker recently. I haven't made it or anything like that, but I think that if you have less comparison and less judgment, that you will have a happier life.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah,
If you have those two elements, if you don't judge people harshly, if you don't judge yourself harshly,
yeah,
and if you don't compare yourself against others, and if you don't compare your kids against others, I think it
yeah.
just makes for a happier, easier life.
This is where I usually put in a plug for my course,
Okay,
course
excellent.
for podcast listeners about gratitude, because gratitude is exactly like be grateful for what you have, but
Yeah, exactly. No, it's exactly the right thing because we take it for granted all the things that we have
mhm,
as Americans. And for those of us who have been fortunate enough to travel overseas like I have and seen poverty at
mhm,
extreme levels,
yeah.
you will never go back to thinking that, you shouldn't be grateful for the garbage man coming every week.
So you do ongoing coaching. I want to talk a little bit about your course too that
Sure.
you just launched, but you do coaching with kids specifically. Do you see
Yes.
that is that like a is that a complement to what the parents do, or do parents kind of offload that task because they don't know how to do it and they're or because they don't want to get involved? Or I mean, what are the dynamics usually when people come to you and they either the young adult wants to hire you or the parent wants to hire you because they're worried? What how does that work?
It usually comes from the parent.
Yeah.
But the course that I just launched is really designed just for the parents
Hmm.
because how you show up and how you ask those questions, like we talked about earlier, is paramount to how they're going to react. As you know, when somebody feels seen and heard, they will grow,
Hmm.
and that's what it's about.
Yeah.
So while I have that new course and it's only like $27, it's a video course. I'm really excited about it. It's like 4 or 5 videos. It's not very long, but you can really understand how you need to show up and what kind of questions you need to ask your young adults, and also how to have those conversations. So that's what the course covers. But to answer your question, sometimes the parents say, well, our child needs the support. And I have coaching packages that do both, that do all of them.
Hmm.
One for the parents, one for the young adults, one for both.
Hmm.
But I usually find that, anyone that I'm coaching in 90 days starts to make tremendous, tremendous shifts
Hmm.
in it because I'm asking a lot of those reflective questions
Yeah.
and going down to what their limiting beliefs are, what their interpretations are, what their assumptions are about life, all of those sort of things, because those come up in how we show up in our day-to-day lives.
To be clear, the course is not well, or the coaching or the work with a young adult. It's not a how to find a job or get hired type of coaching. It's to explain what the difference would be between that approach versus what you do.
Sure. So career coaching is usually just that, go out and network. Here's how to, update
Right.
your resume on LinkedIn. Here's how to, apply for jobs. Here's how to do all of that. What I do is I'm coaching the young adult into figuring out what they want to do, what lights them up.
Hmm.
Because when you have energy for something, when you're excited about something,
Right.
you're going to take massive, massive action.
Yeah.
And so so when I coach a young adult, that's what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to find out where their limiting beliefs are, what their obstacles are, what their challenges are, and how we can overcome them together.
Hmm.
And so that's why differs from career coaching because I'm treating them as an individual who has struggles and who has challenges.
Yeah.
Whereas career coaching is kind of like you're you do assessments and that's helpful, but this is really assessing them in a more holistic way than
Yeah.
just career.
Now, I know a lot of parents probably listening to that and probably a lot of young adults listening to that would say immediately like, well, I don't have one of those things. I don't have a passion like that. I've got interests, but some like I'd love to be a rock star, but that's not going to happen. I can barely play the guitar. They can't summon up what that interest is going to be. And I know at this age, I didn't have that at all. I was lucky. I went to business school and discovered advertising in a
Hmm.
training program, and then I knew I wanted to be in advertising. I had this passion for being in advertising, and I worked my butt off. It took me 9 months to get a job, but nobody would have said, "Oh, he's sitting around the couch." I was like, it was as hard as getting a job on Broadway. It was a very very difficult struggle, but I arrived at it because of this passion that I discovered along the way. So do you see that very often where you have kids who kids or the parents who just think like they don't have any they don't
Yeah,
have any they don't have any energy, they don't have any passion, they like to play video games. Does that count?
right, right. And yeah, that does come up because, they just haven't, because again, that goes back to their messy action.
Yeah.
So they have to try several things
Yeah.
and they have to come up with ideas of things that they could try
Yeah.
because they're not going to find that unless they fall into the right program, right?
Right.
Or if they find the right person or if they find the right connection.
Yeah.
But it has to come from within. They have to initiate that. They
Yeah.
have to say, I'm going to try this, that there's a hint of interest. There's like 10% interest in this,
Yeah.
but let me just try it, check it off the list.
Yeah.
I had this with my son before he went off to college, where he was interested in marine science, but he wasn't really sure. And so we found a college program in not far from where we are, a couple hours from where we are. And he tried that for, a couple months during the summer. And he came back and he was like, I love being in the lab,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
love plankton.
Right.
And he was a junior and he's entering his senior year. He's like, I'm not really interested in school right now. I'm more interested in being in the lab. I mean, but he had to finish school. But that's the point. Is like it took him a long time to figure out these, to try different things and to figure out what he liked.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's where in that case, that young adult needs to go is to try to figure out anything that they're interested in.
Yeah, but it's hard. I think it's a challenge too, especially because we have such short-term uh, horizons in our mind right now. I think it's certainly social media is not. I don't want to get into that diatribe, but that conversation because that is a complete way that kids have all been destroyed. That sometimes I think it's hard for them to even take on to try these things if the time horizon is more than a short-term 4-week class or something, for them to take a longer risk is scary to them. It's like they project already through the experience onto the failure and the disappointment or the inability to do anything with that afterwards and just say, oh, not going to do it. I don't need more pain and disappointment in my life. I'll stay in this spot and not try. Do you get
Right.
that a lot where you then have to figure out a way to get them to engage just to see if the engagement works?
Not a lot. I
Not a
mean,
lot.
the thing is like even if you're saying like, like I graduated from college, I'm going to go get an MBA.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And if they really give it a good, and if that's something that's mildly interesting to them and they try it for a year and then they drop out,
Yeah.
I still consider that a win because they just eliminated something.
Yeah.
And I don't want, I had, my sister actually did this. She went to law school, became a lawyer.
Yeah. That
First year,
happens.
she was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
She was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
But I see that as a win for her because that set her up on a different path. She learned so much about herself. And that's what we really don't take into account is like, even though you may have failed, which I don't think there's a failing, it's really learning. You
Right.
learn something about yourself
Yeah.
and you can make a distinction from there. So I
Yeah.
really look at those um, events as learnings more than anything else. So
Of course, the stakes are so much higher now for a lot of those things too. To get an MBA now is, I think, the cheapest programs are like $35,000 a year, but they go all the way up to like 118, I think, for Harvard and Stanford.
yeah,
It's
easy,
like
easy.
200,000 plus for an MBA from a first run school, and law school's the same way. It's not for the experimenter, unless you have a lot of cash. Well,
Yeah,
this is really interesting
yeah.
to me. I mean, I just because I've got two kids, 21, 25, and both of them are in some phase of this searching, and
Mhm.
this existential question that comes up right at this age too is this sudden realization as as they got into college or maybe they're ending college or whatever, that they are fundamentally alone in the world, and mommy and daddy are there as a backstop, maybe with our unhelpful advice and everything, but they are in charge of their lives and they don't have the same already pre-established pathway that everybody takes. And now very few there are very few training programs in major corporations anymore. So there's not a step that they could take with formal training unless it is graduate school. And I just remember it being really, really frightening because you know that at some point you're going to have to pay for your own rent and your own pizza. And
Yeah,
it's scary as hell. And I just feel for them. And I think your approach is the correct one. It's probably not satisfying to a lot of parents who, again, want a quick fix. Like, no, you will go and do this interview and this interview.
right,
Um,
right. But if we go for the quick fix, it's not going to take because
yeah,
we're just giving advice and they're forced into something that they may not want to
right.
do. So yes, it is a longer, engagement, but usually in 90 days, they usually have some sort of idea or confidence to move forward in the world.
Right. Right.
So
Well, great. I know people could find you at New Grad Launchpad Coaching. That's the longest URL I've
I
ever heard
know,
of.
I know.
We got to get you a Bitly link or another URL. But that it kind of sums up what you do. And on that page, there's a 15-minute consultation if you're interested in talking about what your services are, as well as this course, which is I think it's maybe you put it on the homepage and make it easier,
Yeah,
or
well,
we'll
yeah,
put
I'll
we'll
put it
put
on the
the
homepage. I'll put it on the
full
homepage so it's easier to find.
we'll put the full URL in the show notes.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks, Evan Sanchez, for joining me. For other people who want general coaching on parenting and how to do this balance between your day job and your parenting, or more effort on your parenting because you realize you've got struggles there. That's what I do, and you can find my coaching offerings at GreatDad.com/go, as well as the gratitude course that I was promoting a bit ago. But I'm always just such a believer in gratitude as one of those things that really uh,
It's huge.
helps change your
Absolutely. It
perspective
really
on.
it really helps a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Until next time, remember,
okay. Thanks, Paul.
strong family starts with you. Bye.
Bye.